Hi, listeners. This is a quick thank you for listening and for your ongoing support. If you're enjoying the program, please consider clicking the follow or subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It really helps us out. There's no better way to support us than doing that or sharing the show with a friend, colleague, family member, or any new or expecting parent in your life. It's totally appreciated. On with the show. Hi, I'm Sarah Trott, and welcome to the Fourth Trimester Podcast. I'm a new mama, and this podcast is all about postpartum care for the first few months following birth, the time period also known as the fourth trimester. My postpartum doula, Esther Gallagher, is my co-host. She's a mother, grandmother, perinatal educator, birth and postpartum care provider. Fourth trimester care, our topic, is about the practical, emotional, and social support parents and baby require. And importantly, it helps set the tone for the continuing journey of parenting. Hi, this is Sarah Trott, and welcome back to the Fourth Trimester Podcast. I'm here with a special guest today who I will introduce in a moment. I am going to be talking with her about the Birth Doula's Guide to Navigating New Motherhood. My guest is Carson Meyer. So this topic is about helping answer the question, what happens when a seasoned birth doula becomes a first-time mom? Carson Meyer is a sought-after doula, and she's the founder of a clean beauty company, Sea and the Moon. And she's joining us to share her personal journey into motherhood. With years of experience supporting parents through birth and postpartum, Carson brings a unique perspective on what she thought she knew versus what she learned firsthand. And in this episode, we talk about the realities of postpartum recovery, lessons from home birth, and the balance of caring for yourself while caring for a newborn. And a bit more about Carson. She's a certified nutrition consultant for pregnancy and postpartum. So yes, we're going to talk about food. And as I mentioned, the founder of Sea and the Moon, which is a natural skincare brand rooted in her lifelong passion for environmental health. She's also the author of Growing Together, Doula Wisdom and Holistic Practices for Pregnancy, Birth, and Early Motherhood. She's guided countless families through birth and postpartum, but now she's on her own fourth trimester journey, right? As we know, postpartum is forever. So today she joins us to share the surprises, challenges, and wisdom she's gained from being on both sides of this experience. Carson, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Carson, would you like to just start by introducing yourself a little bit in your own words and maybe share a bit about your own fourth trimester experience?
Yeah, I mean, you did such a great job. I have been a doula for nearly a decade. I started as a birth doula where I was attending births in the home and hospital. And after a few years, I realized that not a lot of my clients were really getting proper, adequate, or any advice at all around nutrition. This went for pregnancy nutrition and postpartum nutrition. And so I ended up getting certified through O Baby Nutrition a few years, maybe about 4 years ago, so that I could help support clients through healthy and, pregnancy and postpartum journey and share my love for food and nourishment there. So that's another aspect of my work and my book that I'm really excited to talk to you about because I know it's something that you're also passionate about and a really, really important part of my postpartum and hopefully an important part of everybody's postpartum. I moved to North Carolina 3.5 years ago. I think, 2021 or 2. Can't keep track of anything anymore. But I gave birth to my first baby, a daughter, 2 years ago. And it's been really amazing, as you said, to have this experience of being a doula, of working with mothers for so long before becoming a mother myself, which I think ultimately helped prepare me in so many ways. And I always say that each and every one of my clients is my doula and my teacher to prepare me for my own journey.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Is there anything that you would want to share that's like a gold nugget about your experience that was something that was perhaps unexpected or just something that people can remember or keep in mind as they prepare for their maybe first time entry into parenthood?
And there's so much, and this is really what the whole book is about, growing together. But I felt really fortunate that I had this experience and I felt very prepared for pregnancy. I did so much work around preparing my body for pregnancy, for of course nourishing myself through foods and just certain lifestyle choices through pregnancy. And then birth was also, I'd gotten to witness so many births and be part of so many births. And I really planned for an experience that I knew was going to set myself up for success and for feeling empowered and for feeling good and connected to my voice and my my needs. And so I chose to give birth at home, as you mentioned, with a midwife. And it was remarkable. And I'll say that like it was just I loved my birth so much and everything was absolutely perfect, but I was so deeply humbled by the physical intensity of it. That was something that like, no one can fully prepare you for, and doesn't matter how much you see it. You're just like, yeah, you would not had known I was a doula if you were watching me give birth. I was screaming and cussing and begging for a cesarean and begging for an epidural. And I think I bit through my poor husband's skin. And I write about in my book just like how actually that like ferocious and wild and completely unhinged part of myself I think was actually a really like healing and important part of birth if it's what arises in you to just have the full freedom to be that version of yourself, which I think we're so often as women um, maybe conditioned or conditioned not to, right? To scare people or to be too loud or to really feel the full extent of what it is to be in the human body. And so that was a really cool experience that I was prepared for and had context for. But as you said, just like going through it myself was a whole new experience. And then postpartum, I also, which is why you have this really important podcast, is we don't give it enough attention or light in at all. We don't with birth or pregnancy really either, but I think postpartum gets the least attention and is often moms are saying it's the part where they wish they had the most knowledge and support. And so I really knew this and understood this, and I invested so much in that time, and it was that was a gift. I guess if like one nugget of wisdom I'd have for postpartum would be to be mindful not to overinvest in the gadgets and things that you don't need, but be intentional about carving out budget, gifts around support. Because what a baby really needs is a mom who's well nourished and cared for, and that has the energy physically and emotionally to show up for baby's needs. And that's so much of what's marketed as at Mothers in the postpartum area from a consumer standpoint are completely unnecessary and don't actually move the needle when it comes to improving postpartum.
I love that point. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I agree wholeheartedly. Like babies don't need all the fancy toys or onesies. Moms need support because as caregivers, we need to be able to look after the baby. We have to have our own cups filled, right? So we need sleep as moms, as parents. It's all partners to, if you have one, everybody needs to be nurtured and cared for.
Are you familiar at all with Little Honey Money? The baby
Oh,
registry?
is that one of the funds? Yeah. I feel like a number of registries now are doing a good job of adding like you can just donate to a specific fund. And then that way parents can use that for a
Exactly.
doula or lactation support or whatever it is they need.
Yeah. So this is the one that I used, and a friend of mine started it, and I just love it. I mean, just the brand is so beautiful and thoughtful. Yeah, I have two older sisters, so I get a lot of hand-me-downs. One of them has a daughter who's 5 now, and so we got lots of hand-me-downs there. My mom saved a lot of my clothes when I was little, so I got some hand-me-downs there. And I think every new parent is excited too to like do some of their own shopping for some of those needs and basics that don't break the bank usually, right? Just like a few things that you may need. But where I really felt like I knew was going to be a big investment, but one that was worthwhile, was in body work, food, nourishment, therapy, pelvic floor therapy. I wanted to make sure that like chiropractics, acupuncture, any cranial sacral for my baby, like that adds up, right? And it's something that we think of as like a total luxury and something that's like just a fancy addition. But in doing so, and for some of my friends and family, they thought like, they were like, what is this? But I also felt like it was my duty to help them. So the next mom who maybe didn't set up a fund like this, that like my guests to my birth blessing ceremony and my friends in my community, that I was kind of showing them a way to show up for me and helping them. And such a big part of postpartum that I think we don't talk about enough too is that because we live in a culture so disconnected from, we don't have a lot of ritual and we don't really have the tools of knowing how to support because our mothers and grandmothers weren't supported in this way. And so it's kind of up to us, which is exactly what you're doing, to help reintegrate this into a culture. And so even though I know people can get afraid of like, well, what will my grandma think when I'm asking for, acupuncture funds? And I'm like, you know what? Like, hopefully it makes the next person in your family, like it helps her to unlearn and like see things in a different way that ultimately might be really healing for her to experience and to be like, wow, my granddaughter is getting this very different experience than what was ever accessible for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it is. We are having to change and rewrite things for ourselves in this generation for sure. In fact, to the extent like you were making the point earlier, we don't talk a lot about postpartum. I mean, postpartum sometimes just it's like a misnomer. People think it just means postpartum depression. It doesn't. It
Yeah.
literally means like the period
I
after
know.
birth,
I talk
you
about
know.
that in my book. I'm like, it's so
Yeah.
crazy that that word has been totally co-opted as something, yeah, negative or scary. And you're like, no, it's literally like we all have it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then on the other side of it, it's like you also made the point, right? There's so much preparation that goes into the birth and then not as much into the postpartum. So I really appreciate the advice that you're sharing, right? Which is take the time to learn about what you can do to surround yourself with support from professionals. Also, like, I want to add the point here. You can have a friend or family member step in. I mean, they can't do acupuncture on you. Please don't ask a friend to do that. But there's a lot that they can do. So if you don't have access to some of these services or it's not affordable for whatever reason,
Yeah.
there's a lot that your friends and your family can do to step in and help fill some of those gaps for you.
Yeah. And that also comes with being willing to talk about it beforehand and like ask for the specific help and like teach that. And that's why I love, which I'm sure you're familiar with, like the first 40 days book,
Mm-hmm.
which is, a classic and so great. But I love this idea of like giving books like Growing Together, the first 40 days to other people in your family and in your life. So when they do show up right after, you don't feel disappointed. They didn't know, what to cook or even to cook or, to ask to help with something else and not just to hold the baby.
Right. Yeah. No, I like that. We've actually had the authors on our show before. And most recently, Marissa Belger came and talked about self-trust as a topic, which is an awesome episode. Self-trust as a parent goes such a long way. So I recommend going back, listeners, to anyone who's hearing this, if that's striking a chord with you, and go check that out. Not all of us have that as something that was modeled for us growing up, right? To like lean into your intuition. And in fact, that reminds me of your birth story, right? Which you just shared with us, which is that you kind of had to really trust yourself and let go and be a bit of a wild woman in that moment when you were giving birth, right? And that was just part of your experience. You weren't trying to disconnect or hold back or, be a certain way. You really were leaning into who you needed to be in that moment. Yeah. Yeah, that's lovely. Okay, so you mentioned food and what to make. What are some of your favorite things that you like to make postpartum for other people and that you really enjoyed as a new mom?
Yeah, so I'm very spoiled. My husband is an amazing cook and does all of our cooking in the family. And so, yeah, I feel very lucky because, and I always say like my pregnancy, I feel like, and my postpartum was so healthy because of him and because of that way that he, like gives and provides and nourishes his family. So some of the things that we ate postpartum and prioritize postpartum. Well, first of all, just also saying for anybody who also has a husband that loves cooking, I also knew from experience that, it can be hard enough to just like cook 2 or 3 meals a day. But I knew with a newborn that he was not going to be able to pull that off and it would be stressful. He would be resentful. And like that, even though I would be the one breastfeeding and, had just given birth, that there was so much that was going to fall on his plate and that he also deserved to be in the postpartum bubble of peace, to really be present and have rest as well. So we did plan to have a postpartum doula who would help cook. We pre-prepared a lot of meals and Chio, which is a great delivery company, had gifted us food. They just launched at that time. And I remember being like, oh, we have a postpartum doula. My husband likes to cook and we prepared meals. We won't really need this, but we'll put it in the freezer and it'll be great if we need something. I didn't even cross my mind that my daughter could be born on Thanksgiving weekend where our postpartum doula was off. And I was just like, oh my God. And so I was like, we have all these meals in the freezer, thank God, from Chio. And those got us through the first few days and they were delicious. And so I really like that company because they're geared just towards like meals that are thoughtful and intentional for postpartum. I started really slow in integrating. I'm a big meat eater. Like my approach is the ancestral diet. And so I knew that after, the blood volume increasing of pregnancy and the blood loss of birth, that I would want to reincorporate animal proteins. But I also was really mindful of doing it slowly because after we give birth, our organs shift and our digestive system is with all the hormones and the change of, all of the system after the baby leaves the body and as the organs are refining their place, it's like a lot on the digestive system. So I wanted to take it really slow. I did a lot of broths and stocks. We added broths to everything that we cooked. I think a pressure cooker is your best friend postpartum, because that gave us the opportunity to really just cook meats down for a really, really, really long time, to make them soft and easy to digest. I started with wild salmon before incorporating animal proteins again. Things like salmon roe, right, which are really rich in omegas and healthy fats to enrich your breast milk. Rice. I did a lot of first 40 days cookbook recipes. And then in my book, I have a recipe that's my postpartum doula, Bella, contributed to the book, and it's a chicken and seaweed soup. But what was so special for me about that is I remember my grandmother, her best friend, my grandmother passed away 18 years ago now. She was German, Jewish, and so her cooking is just, even like talking about it, I can smell and taste those flavors. But her best friend was Chinese, and she would always make a postpartum seaweed chicken soup for any woman in her life, or even somebody she didn't even know. Like if she heard somebody was having a baby, this chicken seaweed soup from her best friend would arrive at her doorstep and at whoever's doorstep. And I remember for my sisters, because they had kids. I mean, one of my sisters, my oldest sister's oldest child is 18. So I had we have a big gap. And I remember how important this soup was for both of my sisters through all 5 together of their pregnancies. And so when it was my turn, I just could hear my sister's voice saying, you have to make the soup. You have to make Audrey's soup. So Bella had already really known this recipe and knew the benefits of seaweed and iodine when it came to thyroid support and postpartum nourishment and mineralization.
Is that a recipe that we can share with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. So we'll put a link to that in the show notes and everyone can try it out. So you've supported so many new parents as a doula personally. And so how did your professional experience shape or challenge you in terms of your own expectations of becoming a mom?
I mean, I think it was just, as I mentioned, kind of like the perfect way to learn, right? Is really through just that experience and watching. And it felt like for many, many years I had been in study for this moment that was about to take place. But I do often say now, I was really prepared for pregnancy, really prepared for birth, really felt so held in that first 40 days. And then 40 days came and went, and I was like, I don't know anything after this. I'm really experienced up until this point, and now I'm just, swimming off the deep end like the rest of everyone else. And I do remember a few things that happened around that 40-day mark, or the 6-week mark, being like, okay, I know that postpartum's forever. I know that it's not linear, and I know that just one day to the next, you don't just go back, right? But I was the first 6 weeks, I was by the book. I didn't leave the house. I didn't even look at my phone. I didn't work. What is work? I was so committed to a sacred window. And then at 6 weeks, I could feel okay, why are my jeans fitting again? And why does my vagina still feel a little weird? And why, okay, I need to work. It was so interesting. And so even though I told myself and taught this, and I had to remind myself, okay, just because your postpartum is up, or those 40 days are up, you still are integrating. And that integration is going to continue on. And so that, I think, was the hardest part for me, was going back to work. And even though I have the privilege of working from home and running my companies from home, I still was okay, and what is this balance going to be? And I know my body is not going to bounce right back to what it was, or that it'll take time to just, feel like a version of myself again. Even I, knowing this, felt those time restrictions, or whatever you call them, expectations, start to bubble up at that 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't a magic number. It's going to be different for everybody. And it's not like you suddenly say, okay, I'm back to what it was, because there is no going back, right? Yeah. It's only through. You're changed forever through an experience like becoming a parent. And yeah, I mean, expectations are so tricky, right? Because if you really get your heart set on something, you can sort of set yourself up for a challenge. If you don't have a little bit of flexibility built into the mindset of okay, well, it might not go exactly as I planned, or it might not go a certain way, which is true for the birth. And I really like that you're applying this lesson to the postpartum period too.
Yeah. And that is just not linear. I mean, some of those things, of course, you never go back to your old life, your old self, your old identity ever again. And so I often say there's a lot of death and grief in the rebirth that's so necessary and beautiful. But there are certain parts of myself that I am coming back to in a way that I think is also really cool and can be nice for those who are in the thick of pregnancy, or even those early postpartum weeks to know that, we never know when and if it's going to return, but that sometimes you can reintegrate those elements into your new life in a way that can feel really great later on. And so for me right now, I'm like sleeping through the night for the first time in a really, really long time. Might not last forever, who knows? But I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm starting to recognize some familiar aspects of my existence that are nice. And like I fit into my jeans again, and that's great. And like I feel like, yeah, like feeling a connection with my body in ways that I didn't before. And so I love how you started this saying, I'm in my postpartum, right? That we're always in it, but that in time, things do feel better.
Yeah. And I'll use this opportunity to mention another book, which is fantastic for people who are listening, which is called Postpartum is Forever by Jane Honigman, who is the founder of Postpartum Support International and also a guest on the show. Yeah. So I definitely recommend your book, Carson, as well as Jane. So if someone's out there, books are one of those things where I feel like you can get a lot of fantastic information and surround yourself with it. And it's not such a big investment that you have to really think it through. Like just you can get a book. It's worth it. Invest in yourself and give that as self-care to yourself.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted Growing Together to be like, if you see my shelf, you know that I'm a birth book junkie and I have like hundreds of birth books. I love to absorb multiple books. And I say like, if that's you, amazing, read every book there is. But I also know I've like worked with so many clients who don't really want to be reading a bunch of like, maybe they're just like, I want like one book that's going to walk me through everything I need to know. And so something that excites me about Growing Together is that there's for pregnancy, it's for birth, it's for postpartum, it's about the relationship, it's about those breastfeeding, but also tends to the emotional aspect of each of those seasons and provides an activity week by week to help integrate so that the book itself does become a tool to really carve out and set yourself up for support and put the practice into action.
Yeah, I really like that structure. Is there a passage from your book? We didn't really talk about this beforehand, but if I want to invite you, if there's something that you wanted to read out of it, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I would love to. This is so fun. I've never been asked to do this on a podcast yet. So my first official reading. As I said, I have activities in every chapter, and this is week 3's postpartum activity, and it's called A Love Letter to Yourself. One of the biggest myths in our culture is that parents have it all together. This fallacy of perfection plays a huge role in the pressures and unrealistic expectations parents face. The pressure to meet external expectations or even one's own personal expectations can bring up feelings of guilt, shame, and judgment. These feelings keep us from living in the present moment. Just like a newborn is learning everything for the first time, so are you. You and your baby are growing together. Treating yourself with the same compassion and patience you would your baby is so important. You are resilient. You are capable of feeling the big waves of change and continuing to show up for your baby. This week, write a letter to your little one sharing the joy and challenges you face. Reveal any insecurities or pressures you may feel on this journey, along with the feelings of joy, confidence, excitement, and gratitude. Ask questions. Remind your little one that you too are growing and learning. Let this exercise be a reminder that you and all of your humanness are everything your baby needs and more. You are strong and capable of riding the waves. It is okay to show your vulnerability and your strength. This letter is just for you.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about your decision to have a home birth. So you chose to have a home birth. What made you decide on that? And are there any misconceptions or misunderstandings you think that people might have about home birth?
Yeah. For me, there was no question. Having attended so many births at home and hospital, I knew that home was going to be the best setting for me and what I needed and wanted from my experience. I always say there's no one right place to give birth. The best place is where you feel safe and where you feel the most support, and that's something to listen to for yourself in making the decision. And for me, the place where I felt I could get the most support, the most thorough care was going to be with a midwife. I just felt that like heart-centered care that was going to talk to me about nutrition and allow for sessions to be more than just 15 minutes. I also chose a midwife who was willing to see more than just the physical of birth, but to really understand it as an emotional rite of passage. And so our hour-plus long prenatal visits contained some, the basic checkup procedures, but also conversations on how our relationship was doing, how my feelings were, what my fears were, what my relationship with my mother was like so much more. And so that was really beautiful and really, really important to me. I think some of the main, and then in terms of choosing, I'll get back to the misconception. One of the, or few of the reasons why home birth was so important to me is I knew that I wanted to have full freedom of mobility to labor as I desired. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I was so blown away by the physical intensity of birth, and there's just no way I don't think I could have done it and made it if I was restricted. And one thing that was really cool to feel myself was I would be like, okay, I love the tub. And then I'd be like, get me out of the tub. Like 1 second to the next, right? And then be like, okay, I like the shower. Get out of the shower. Okay, I like this position. I hate this position, right? And I was so free and able to move from one place to the next right as my body dictated it, right? There was no, okay, we have to stay here on the monitor, or, we're going to have to ask you to get into the bed, or whatever it was. Like, I was in full freedom mode. I was in a place in my bedroom, in my bathroom, in the places I feel the most comfortable, and surrounded by the people who I felt the most comfortable in, as I said, like really unleashing that inner wild woman, seeing me naked, and the people who I knew were going to meet me and greet me with the respect that I wanted in my birth. And so I talk a lot with my clients about, and in my book, about tigers, right, which is our fears and the things that can show up in our births that can scare us, right? Or we all have them. We all have fears, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I wanted to do everything I could to minimize other people's tigers from coming into the space. And so this doesn't necessarily mean your birth team, but even just like friends or family that you welcome into the birth. And so for me, keeping that space really private and intimate with people who I knew me and had similar approach and belief systems around birth was really important. And I knew that was going to be at home. I also wanted that postpartum period to be honored, where I was the only one to be holding the baby and welcoming and calling her in gently and lovingly without unnecessary intervention or stimulation, or any like routine exams that would take her off of me in those early hours and days and weeks, really. And then misconceptions, I think there's so many when it comes to birth. And there's actually a lot that varies widely state to state in terms of the type of midwifery care that's available. Sorry, I hope my dog's not barking through this. But I think some of the biggest misconceptions is that home birth is inherently dangerous or risky, when most home births are attended by midwives who are well trained and experienced and well versed in all things birth. They come with emergency medication if that becomes necessary. They're also, throughout pregnancy and labor, there to assess the health of that pregnancy, to make a change if anything arises that would create a greater risk for that mom or baby. And so there's a lot of thoughtfulness and thoroughness that goes into the safety of home birth. And we see cesarean rates are significantly lower under midwifery care at home, right? And so that unnecessary intervention that often happens in the hospital can actually result in greater complications for those where it's not necessary. And so there's a lot of benefits for a low-risk mom who feels safe and supported at home to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you said low risk specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it's a very small percentage of total births in the United States that are done at home. So I appreciate hearing the story and shedding light on that when we have the chance to do it. That's
cool. And I know this can be like, a grim part, but we have one of the worst birth outcomes in the world, the United States, right? And about 1% of births are taking place at home. So something has to change. And there's something we need to look at within the obstetrical system in the US that's not working. And so I do think that for home birth to be getting a bad rap is really not fair in the context of the failure of the system when it comes to maternal health in postpartum as well.
Yeah. And it's an interesting topic. And when you also think about some of the research that's coming out, March of Dimes did a report that came out about maternity healthcare deserts. So 35% of counties in the US don't have access to an OBGYN who can deliver your baby, or a hospital or birth center for delivering your baby. So people are either driving a long way or they're not getting the care.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting if people have the opportunity to find a professional who has the right experience and credentials to help them with a home birth in situations like that, it could be a nice alternative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important too for states to embrace midwifery care, whatever form of midwifery care, so that when people do need to or want to seek out emergency medicine or hospital care at any point, that they have access to it and they're welcomed with open arms.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So one thing I wanted to touch on with you, there's a big transition that happens for parents in terms of identity. So like you're balancing your personal identity and then work and then parenthood. I'd just be curious to know how you have navigated balancing that transition and what
Yeah.
helped you the most with that.
I mean, it's funny because my personal identity is in this work, right? And so parenthood is such a big part of it, which I'm so grateful for because it's what I love. It's what I'm passionate about. And I get to, step away from like my mothering role to do this, to talk more with people who are also, have just a passion for this topic. But I also, I think like so many other moms struggle with the balancing of time management, right? Like writing a book and publishing a book and the work and the time that requires. And then also wanting to be completely present through the early years that go really fast. But something I write about in my book that I hope resonates with the readers is just this idea that like there's no one right way for everyone. And for some women, stepping away, pausing, or leaving their work altogether feels right for motherhood. Feels really good. And I've often seen that surprise women because they've been kind of told through feminism that like they should or will want to have a place in the workforce as a mom. And a lot of parents are like, actually, I just don't want to. Like I loved my job. I was like, whatever, at the top of my company and I'm leaving. Like I'm out. I just want to be a mom or be home with my child. And I think that's beautiful. And I think it's important to listen to that. And then I also have clients and friends, and I can relate to this myself, where it's like maybe the desire to be home and being in the mother role all day is what they anticipated doing or planned to do. But then they found that there's aspects of themselves that they feel inspired by outside the home, or even like in a podcast, which I see some new moms starting to create in a way of like connecting outside of the home. And that if that brings more fulfillment to you and to your home life and to your children as a result, like, what a beautiful thing. And so, I think just trying to lean into that myself, it's kind of a blessing and a curse when you love your work so much, right? And you love what you do and you love connecting with other women. But in my book, I kind of just talk about and encourage women to not set anything in stone before your baby's born. Might change, and that's okay. And it's okay for it to change over and over again, and to just like stay present, I guess, with whatever's calling you.
Thank you. Carson, we've covered a lot of ground. I would love to invite you to share any final words or thoughts you might have with our listeners.
Yeah, just to really invest in that postpartum care. Body work is so valuable. I can remember the days where I got hands-on body work and my mood shifted significantly. So really encourage you to put that on your registry or just budget out in any way you can to bring in that community, call in that community, and don't be afraid to be specific with what your needs are and how you might need support. Don't be afraid to also wait to welcome visitors into your home until you're ready. There's no rush. And I guess last but not least is find community of other moms and women who make you feel good.
Great. Thank you. Where can people go to find more about you?
You can go to my website, carson-meyer.com. And then also, if you're interested in checking out my products, you can go to seeinthemoon.com. That's just the letter C. My book is called Growing Together. And my Instagram is at @ccmeyer.
Perfect. Thank you, Carson.
Thank you, Sarah.
You can subscribe to this podcast in order to hear more from us. Thank you for listening, everyone, and I hope you'll join us next time on the Fourth Trimester. The theme music on this podcast was created by Sean Trott. Hear more at soundcloud.com/Sean Trott. Special thanks to my true loves, my husband Ben, daughter Penelope, and baby girl Evelyn. Don't forget to share the Fourth Trimester Podcast with any new and expecting parents. I'm Sarah Trott. Goodbye for now.
Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote this song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I'll sing a song for you. You got your wheels, you got your gears, you ride around town without any fear. You got your pedals, you got your brakes, you always wear your helmet for safety's sake. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing all that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you. Hello again, bicycle man. I know you're doing the best that you can. I wrote the song, simple and true. I wrote the song, I sing a song for you.